Well, I do want to thank Brooke and the board of directors and all the presenters here have just been fantastic. And I say that kind of as an ex-NFL guy that, boy, I played in the day when they used to give us salt pills and then you'd have no water during 2-3 hour practices during the day. We used to hide ice chips all over the field, and if you got an ice chip and you dropped that thing in a pile of mud, you would brush that off and just pop it. And I played in the day when they didn't have the word concussion. You got dinged. I was knocked out in Detroit one time for so long, I ended up spending the night in Henry Ford Hospital. Was sick the whole week, played the next 2 games, got knocked out 3 games in a row without anybody ever thinking anything about that. So I believe this, though, and I think somebody said this earlier, if sports are going to change, and we're going to reclaim the educational role and the social, moral, ethical development role, I think moms have this incredible power, and I think Brooks and MomsTEAM's really onto something. You look at the NFL today in the midst not only of the malviolence toward women, but also in terms of corporal punishment. Boy, those things are at the forefront of the news and newspaper today because of moms and women. Those issues weren't driven by men. So I'm thrilled to be here. Let me just tell you a little bit what I do. I run a thing called Coach for America. I believe you can bring about individual, community, and societal change through sports and coaching. And people always ask me, well, why sports? You think of the role that sports plays in America today. Sports will engage more individuals, more communities, more families in a shared activity than any cultural activity, organization, or religion in America today. It is the secular religion of this society, and there is a transmission of values that comes out of the sports nexus with all of its marketing, with all of its advertising, that's not healthy for the development of young people in America. And I think as a nation, we've lost our ball in the weeds of what sports and the role that sports ought to play in the development, not only of boys and girls, but also of citizens, contributors to our society as well. So I think if we're going to bring about these changes, I think part of it's got to go through coaches. And to me, there are 2 kinds of coaches in America. You're either transactional or you're transformational. Basically, transactional coaches use young people for their own power, their own identity, their own validation. Transformational coaches, it's always about that coach first, the team second, and the players' needs somewhere down the road. Transactional coaches, all they do is monitor kids. They move them from drill to drill, season to season, no relationship, and therefore no impact. The second kind of coach in America today is a transformational coach. This is a coach that understands the power, the platform, the position they have in the lives of young people, and they're going to use that to change the arc of every young person's life. Transformational coaches, boy, they're going to mentor young people. They don't monitor them. They're going to use that platform and mentor them through their own social, moral, ethical makeup and composition in this world. We need more transformational coaches. Now, I think the way that you uncover whether someone is transactional or transformational is there are 4 fundamental questions that every coach needs to be able to answer. And you need to be able to answer these with great integrity. And they really ought to come out of every coach's life narrative and sports narrative as well. And the first question is this: why do you coach? Why do you coach? Is it about you or is it about the players? I think every transactional coach ought to make the statement that I'm in here, it's about me, it's about what I'm trying to do. Transformational coaches always have a transformational purpose statement. When I started to coach, I had to figure out, why would I make the sacrifices, give up the time that I was going to do? I had to have something that was big enough to justify those sacrifices. And to me, I coach to help boys become men of empathy and integrity who will lead, be responsible, and change the world for good. Once I understood why I was coaching, what my purpose was, now I could take all of my drills, all of my speeches, all of my interaction with my players and their parents and start building a culture to help boys become men of empathy and integrity who will lead, be responsible, and change the world. So the first question is, why do you coach? Second question is, why do you coach the way that you do? When you think about coaches, how they run their practices, how they interface with players, parents, why do they do it that way? Is it because they've studied best practices, or are coaches just merely repeating the way that they were coached? And I think all of us, when we were young, our parents said something to us and we thought, my goodness, that's stupid. When I become a parent, I'll never say that. And you have kids and what comes out of your mouth, those very same words. I think many coaches were put in position by transactional coaches. They were talked down to positions that didn't serve them well, and yet when they became coaches, those players, boy, they repeated the same tired out drills. Third question is this: what does it feel like to be coached by you? See, I think every transformational coach has an empathic connection to their players. You think about the pressure that are on young boys and girls in this country today. I don't think it's ever been more difficult to be a youngster in America than it is today, with all the social messaging, with all the media, with all the conflicting values that young people receive in this world today. So every kid, boy, they've got academic pressure, they got parental pressure, they got peer pressure, sexual pressure. They're trying to figure out their own social-emotional identity, their makeup, and they walk onto your field as a coach. Well, you need to have an understanding. What does that feel like to be coached by you? There has to be a connection. And then the fourth question every coach needs to be able to answer is, how do you define success as a coach? And success not in terms of W's and L's, but success as a transformational coach, changing the arc of every young person's life. And your definition of success has to flow out of your purpose statement. I can't say I coach to help boys become men of empathy and integrity who will lead, be responsible, and change the world for good, and then define success based on win-loss records, Division I high schools. So I think when you have transformational coaches, I think there are at least, I'll give you 4 of them. I think there are 4 complements of what we're trying to accomplish today that is only going to be accomplished by transformational coaches. And the first thing is this, and I think all of us need to understand that sports in America today ought to be considered co-curricular, not extracurricular. Extracurricular implies that that is something that begins at the end of the educational day. I would say that as a coach, you have the last classroom of the day. And the way you coach ought to be continuation of whatever that educational philosophy of the institution that you're connected to. If they're going to be student athletes, then we ought to be teacher coaches. And we ought to have a curriculum that's going to address whatever is leukemic in your community, on your team, to the healthy development of boys and girls, and that's what you need to teach to. You know, you think about the math class. That math teacher is held responsible to move every student from point A to point B in the course of a semester. In the math class, you can't just teach the best 11, the best 22, the best 10, the best 5. Your responsibility is to make sure that every student has an opportunity to be the best students they're capable of becoming. Why in the world do we think we can put a whistle on a math teacher, put them in an athletic arena, and then let them coach in a way that violates the fundamentals, principles of education? Second thing we need to relook at is competition. Competition does not have to mean I win, you lose. Competition has historically been about a mutual quest for excellence. I want to engage in a competitive experience to bring out the very best in me. Young people aren't competing with the person next to them. Young people ought to compete with themselves to overcome their own self-imposed limitations, their own marginalizations, or whatever issues they have. We need to see competition, and coaches need to understand that you can win with humility and you can lose with honor. Right now, we've got all these kids shaking hands after a game, and the team that won, those kids go through the line like this, and the kids that lost go through like this. They need to be taught about honoring competition, which is what that is all about. I would say the third thing that transformational coaches understand is that sports in America ought to be about building character. See, I think the great myth in America today is that sports builds character. That's not true in a win-at-all-cost kind of mentality. Sports do not build character unless a coach has it, exemplifies it, models it, and teaches that as well. Now, character is an old Greek word. It means to mark, to scratch, to engrave. And when that silversmith created that beautiful silver chalice, at the end of that, they would turn that over and put their character on it so that everyone know who produced that. In the same way, every program ought to have at least 3 basic character traits that every coach is making sure that every kid gets stamped with. And you know, you've got to identify what those are in your program. You've got to define them. You've got to integrate them into a practice. And whenever you see a player doing the very character that you're trying to teach, Boy, you stop practicing at that moment because that is a moment of greatness. So sports ought to be considered co-curricular. We have to redefine competition. We need to make sure that there's some kind of a character-based component to that. Else, why do we have our kids playing sports, if not for a physical, educational, social-emotional makeup and development as well? Then the last thing I would say is your field as a coach is a classroom. And again, you've got to bring your curriculum every day. So what we do in our program, in my understanding, I do an awful lot of work on the issue of masculinity. Tremendous confusion about what it means to be a man. Every boy in America has been fed 3 fundamental lies about their masculinity. And the first lie is this. Boys learn this by the time they're 7, 8 years old. They learn this on ball fields and playgrounds and during recess all over our communities. And that is, as a culture, we teach young boys that their value, their worth as a man is somehow dependent on athletic ability, size, strength, or the capacity to compete and win. So many of the young boys that have athletic interests that can catch it down and out or hit the hanging curve, those boys are elevated on that playground. They're seen as having more value, more worth, even ascribed a little more masculinity. And I would say that is an absolute lie. Being a man doesn't have a single thing to do with athletic ability. Second lie every boy receives, and this is what's being played out in the media today, that as a culture we teach young boys that what it means to be a man has something to do with issues of sexual conquest. What's it mean to be a man in many parts of our community? It means we have the capacity to bring some young girl alongside of ourselves and then use her. Use her to either gratify some kind of physical need or use her to validate some kind of masculine insecurity. Boys in America need to understand that certainly doesn't make you a man. That makes you a user of other human beings. So we teach our players that masculinity is about 2 fundamental things, the exact things that femininity is about. It's all about relationships. Boy, it emanates from the heart. It's the heart that makes you a man. It's the heart that gives you value, empathy, compassion. It's the heart that allows you to build relationships. Second thing that defines all of our humanity as men and women, that all of us have this responsibility to give back, to put a stake in the ground and make the world more fair, more just, more hospitable for every human being. Relationships, commitment to a cause. So what's a team? A team is nothing more than a set of relationships for a cause. It has a common purpose, performance goals and objectives. There's a mutually accountable work ethic. But it's always built on the trust, the respect, the integrity, and the dignity of every player. So if a team is a set of relationships for a cause, and if masculinity and femininity can be defined by relationships and commitment to a cause, it's the ideal place to help boys and girls become men and women. But you've got to figure out what your curriculum is. So I just Friday filmed a thing for the NFL and training coaches, high school, college coaches, how to speak about this male violence toward women. Now, we live in a culture where tremendous violence toward women. Well, we'll have 1 to 3 million women that are going to be physically and or sexually abused in America today. The most dangerous place for a woman in this country isn't to be on the street after midnight. It's in her home. We'll have over 650,000 women that are going to be reported raped in this country, 1 every 40 seconds. And everybody that works in the field agrees those are underreported by 5 or 6 to 1. 1 out of 5 teenage dating relationships involve some kind of physical and or sexual force. So how do we take coaches that have this almost unparalleled power platform position in the lives of their players? How are we going to train them to speak about male violence toward women? Now, male violence toward women is a male crime of power and control. Women can't end it. All women can do is reduce the risk. Well, they can look in the back seat, they can carry a whistle, they can try to protect themselves. But male violence toward women is not going to end until we raise up a generation of men that have the moral clarity and the moral courage to call out other men on sexist language, the way they talk about or treat girls and women. And I think as coaches, we have this incredible opportunity to make a huge impact in all of our schools. So let me tell you a suggested curriculum. Now, what we're trying to do is to make sure that every coach in America, every high school in America, the week of the homecoming dance, that's when they're going to teach their players about how to date and respect girls and women. Boy, that's when you're going to break this masculine concept that sexual conquest is somehow a part and parcel of what it means to be a man. So what would happen is Mondays the players come down, Saturdays the homecoming dance. So you begin the practice and you ask those players, who's taking a date? And then you tell them, that date you're taking to the dance, that's not something to be conquered or used. That is some mother and father's most cherished relationship. And you ought to treat her in a way that you expected your mother to be treated when she dated, how you expect your sister to be treated. So then you have a conversation. How did you expect your mother to be treated when she dated, your sister to be treated as she dates? And then you have a conversation about hypocrisy. You can't want that for your sister and then treat somebody else's sister in a radical way. Second day, they come down and do a guided meditation, get them connected to their breathing, and then ask them to just think about the last time somebody called you a name that really hurt you. Think about the words that were used, the feelings that were created. Think about the intent of the person using those words. And once I've got 70 high school boys connected to their own pain, I'll ask them to then just think about what it means to a high school girl when you call her fat or ugly or a slut or dyke or put some kind of put down. Think about the power of your words to elevate other human beings or to tear them down. Next day they'll come down to practice and we'll do a case scenarios. You're at a party and some girl is stupid drunk and one of your teammates is trying to drag her into a bedroom. What do you do as a man at that moment? Do you just walk on by? You think it's none of your business? You think your classmate's going to get lucky tonight? Or as a man, do you walk in the midst of that on behalf of two human beings? Boy, we spend all this time in sports worrying about physical courage. It's the moral courage that needs to be developed. When young people have the moral courage to speak their own truth out of their own morality, their own value system, boy, that's when change begins. Then what we do on the next day is every boy on the team has to write a couple paragraphs about how they're going to treat their date from the moment they pick her up and then take her to the dance. Now, what writing does is it forces the bilateral integration of the left and right hemispheres of the brain, the thinking and the feeling. So what we'll do before practice is we'll have 3 or 4 of those letters, and we'll read them in front of the whole team because we want to make sure that players understand if you're going to play for a transformational coach, boy, here's the standard. And here's the myth that we're going to bust in this society. So every boy every year has to sign a pledge. And on that pledge, it has all the horrific statistics of male violence toward women in this country. And then we teach the boys. You can't be powerful when others are powerless. And you never commit, condone, or remain silent amidst of homophobic labeling of other boys or put down of girls and women. And then what we do on the day of the game is we take 2 moms and 2 dads off of our teams. 2 moms and 2 dads that not only have adolescent sons, but also have daughters. Each of them are given 5 minutes to stand in front of 70 high school boys and talk about how much they love their daughters and how they expect them to get treated when they go on a date with them. Boy, I've got this platform. I've got this power, this position. Power as a coach is the ability to prevent or create change. And what we've got is a massive amount of confusion amongst power between transactional and transformational coach. I'll give you one other illustration. We do the exact same thing with a race week. Boy, racism in America continues to rear its ugly head. Boy, those things can be changed. And as a transformational coach, I have the opportunity to make my players anti-racist. Now, we have a very mixed team, and we're very fortunate in that. But what we'll do is we begin every week, boy, we'll teach every boy about Dred Scott. Now, as a product of the 1960s myself, I'm amazed at the lack of knowledge that young people have about the whole civil rights movement. So we'll teach them about Dred Scott. Dred Scott was a slave 3 different times, ran away to the Free State. Each time the slave master brought him back into slavery. The 3rd time, the abolitionists got a hold of the Dred Scott decision, and they took that to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of America, who issued the Dred Scott decision that said basically no person of African descent is covered by constitutional right. Boy, that became systemic evil, an unjust law. It went from federal down to state levels, and we still live with some of the remnants of that. What we do is we'll take 3 of our black players and send them away from the team. And then we'll tell the team, pretend you don't know these guys. They might do-rag, they might drop their pants, we'll bring them in front of the team, and then we'll have the whole team verbalize all the stereotypes that they've enculturated based on some kid's skin color. Then we'll take 3 of our lacrosse players, white kids, got the flow, board shorts, high-top sneakers, and do the exact same thing. Boy, how we verbalize all these stereotypes about human beings. The written assignment that week, every boy on our team has to write a couple paragraphs about who their best friend is of another race and why. Boy, and Antoine's up here talking about why Bobby's a brother from a different mother. Boy, there's power in there. Every year, every boy on our team has to memorize Langston Hughes' poem, I Too Sing America, 1922. I'm the darker brother. They send me in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat and grow strong. Besides, one day I'll sit at the table and they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. It talks about the past, the hope for the future, and the present as well. Boy, as coaches, we have this incredible platform, power, and position. The challenge is to get coaches healthy enough to get them to understand that sports, boy, ought to be co-curricular. We redefine competition, make sure that we're developing character, and have a curriculum that's going to speak to every player. That's when change begins. So as the moms team here, boy, I want to just thank you and again affirm your movement here. You have a power, you have a voice that's going to force changes, not only in the world of sports, but in coaches as well. Thank you very much.